The ancient history of the British Isles is a turbulent journey, not a story of continuous evolution, but rather a series of arrivals and departures of human beings over hundreds of thousands of years. The first people to set foot here may have crossed the land bridge that once connected continental Europe to Britain at a time when the sea had not yet separated the island as it does today. However, their presence was often temporary, interrupted by major climatic changes. Britain at that time was not a stable land, but a harsh testing ground, especially during the periods of the Ice Ages. The earliest archaeological evidence shows that humans were present on the island from a very early stage, but what they left behind was quite primitive. Unlike other areas of Europe, where finely crafted hand axes were commonly found, the tools discovered in Britain were much simpler and cruder. This has sparked heated debates among archaeologists. Some argue that these communities may never have learned how to make hand axes. Others propose that they may have deliberately abandoned such tools in favor of simpler, more practical implements better suited to survival in their specific environment. One of the most important discoveries is the ancient wooden spear found at Clacton-on-Sea. This wooden implement may have been used as a spear, a digging tool, or a weapon to prey, indicating an advancement in early woodworking skills. It is a rare piece of evidence showing that these people did not rely solely on stone, but also knew how to make use of natural materials like wood to create tools. Although the exact purpose of the spear is still under investigation, its existence demonstrates the remarkable adaptability and ingenuity of our ancestors. Yet, even such advancements could not withstand the force of nature. Around 30,000 years ago, Earth entered a new ice age. Britain's climate became extremely cold and harsh, making survival virtually impossible. With no other choice, humans were once again forced to abandon this land in search of warmer, more hospitable places. Britain entered a period of human absence until the climate improved and new groups of people found their way back. As the Ice Age ended and the climate gradually became warmer, the glaciers began to melt, opening up fertile forests and plains, ideal conditions for life to return. Along with the animals, prehistoric humans also re-entered the British Isles. But this time they were different. They were changed, more advanced, more mobile, and equipped with far more advanced technology than their ancestors had been tens of thousands of years before. One of the most notable advances was the Levallois stoneworking technique, a technology that allowed them to prepare a large core of stone, then extract multiple tools from the same block. This approach was not only efficient in terms of materials, but also made them more proactive in their hunting and traveling. Instead of having to carry a heavy collection of tools, they could now carry just a few cores and work on the spot when needed. This allowed them to operate flexibly in a variety of terrains, while demonstrating superior strategic thinking and creativity compared to previous generations. This allowed them to operate flexibly in a variety of terrains, while demonstrating superior strategic thinking and creativity compared to previous generations. However, nature changed the game once again. About 240,000 years ago, a huge geological event occurred. For a long time, the island of Great Britain was connected to the rest of Europe by a vast strip of land. This land was once a vital corridor for migrating herds of animals and even humans. However, melting ice combined with the flow of major rivers created a natural disaster. A massive flood broke the Isthmus of Dover, the fragile boundary between the island of Great Britain and the continent. The result was a cataclysmic event that completely cut Britain off from Europe, turning it into an isolated island, with lasting impacts on both ecosystems and human migration. The hyenas, which had once dominated the land, disappeared, replaced by wolves, more flexible and adapted to the cold environment and effective hunters in the dense forests. And it wasn't just animals. Neanderthals also returned to Britain around 70,000 years ago. The Neanderthals were no longer obscure creatures in evolutionary history. They were skilled hunters, well-versed in the terrain, climate, and knew how to coordinate in groups to hunt large animals. They used stone spears, attacking prey at close range, an act that required courage, strength, and superior skill. For a long time, they dominated the land, adapted to the cold environment, and survived many natural upheavals. The final turning point, however, came when Homo sapiens, modern humans, began to migrate into Europe. With their advanced intelligence, social organization, and technology, they gradually gained the upper hand. Although it is unclear exactly what caused the Neanderthals to disappear, their fate seems sealed from this point on. After emerging in Africa, Homo sapiens, modern humans, began their journey of territorial expansion across the continents, including Europe. Unlike the Neanderthals, Homo sapiens not only possessed superior survival skills, but also brought with them a rich and unprecedented cultural heritage. They painted on cave walls, carved statues, created musical instruments, and even buried their dead, according to ritual. Early signs of abstract thinking, religious belief, and the formation of cultural identity. However, archaeological evidence of their rich cultural life remains scarce in the territory of Britain. The primary reason lies in the prolonged climatic instability that lasted for tens of thousands of years. During the final stages of the Ice Age, Britain experienced violent climatic shifts, often swinging from warm to freezing conditions within very short periods. One key factor behind this instability was the Gulf Stream, a massive warm ocean current flowing from the tropics across the Atlantic, keeping Europe's climate, and Britain's in particular, relatively temperate. Yet, this current repeatedly weakened or temporarily halted in the past due to the sudden melting of massive Arctic ice sheets. Such drastic changes posed severe challenges for ancient humans. Each time this occurred, people were forced to abandon the region, retreat southward, or seek refuge in areas with milder climates. This cycle of occupation and abandonment continued for thousands of years, turning Britain into a land that was repeatedly settled and then deserted, a recurring rhythm of hope and retreat. But around 12,000 years ago, a historic turning point arrived. The global climate stabilized, the glaciers melted completely, and the Gulf Stream resumed its warm flow. This marked the beginning of a new era, the Holocene, a warm and stable climatic period that continues to this day. With ideal environmental conditions, humans returned to Britain this time for good. No longer just short-term migratory hunting groups, they began to settle, cultivate the land, and develop increasingly complex forms of social organization. From this point on, Britain's history entered an entirely new chapter, no longer a scattered sequence of brief arrivals and departures, but a continuous human presence, laying the foundation for the future civilizations that would rise on this land. As the climate entered a more stable and warmer phase during the Holocene, modern humans not only returned to the British Isles, but also began to settle for longer periods, building semi-permanent communities that relied on hunting, gathering, and adapting to the flourishing forest environment. This ecological shift led to changes in survival strategies, and humans made remarkable advances in both technology and social organization. One of the most significant innovations was the improvement of hunting tools. Unlike the primitive stone spears used before, they now employed more sophisticated weapons, such as bows and arrows, throwing spears, and especially harpoons hunting hooks made from bone or ivory, highly effective for hunting animals near rivers and lakes. The invention of the spear thrower, atlatl, greatly increased the range and power of these weapons, allowing hunters to strike prey from a safe distance. Alongside technology, they had another special ally, the dog. Archaeological evidence shows that this bond extended far beyond practical roles. Some dogs were buried with ceremonial rites similar to humans, indicating that they had truly become members of the community. At the same time, humans began to exploit new materials for tool making: bone, ivory, and deer antlers. From lightweight spear tips, fishing hooks, to various knives, axes, and ranged weapons, all were continuously improved and optimized. But then, a massive offshore earthquake near Norway triggered a geological event known as the Storuteller slide, an enormous underwater landslide that generated a catastrophic tsunami sweeping across the North Sea. The powerful waves wiped out the last inhabitants of Doggerland, submerging the entire region beneath the ocean. Soon after, global ice melt caused sea levels to rise further, ensuring Doggerland would never re-emerge. This was the final and permanent separation. From that moment onward, the British Isles officially became an isolated island. The story of the first people to set foot on the island of Britain does not end here, it is only just beginning. From small, scattered bands of hunter-gatherers living seasonally in forests, plains, and along rivers, humans would gradually enter an entirely new Aratha Neolithic period, where they would forever transform both themselves and this land. Instead of roaming with wild herds, they began to cultivate crops and domesticate animals. This was a quiet but profound revolution, the agricultural revolution. With agriculture, people were no longer entirely dependent on nature. For the first time, they could control and reshape the land, creating a stable food supply. This allowed them to build homes from wood, earth, and stone, settle permanently, and establish the first villages across the British Isles. Settlement brought sweeping changes: the accumulation of wealth, the division of labor, and the emergence of early belief systems. Prehistoric people began to observe the sky, measure time, and even leave behind colossal stone structures such as Stonehenge, Avebury, and other stone circles arranged with astonishing precision. These monuments reveal a remarkable level of engineering, organization, and abstract thinking. They may have served as astronomical observatories, places of religious ceremony, or time markers offering us the first glimpses of a society that was organized, spiritually aware, and bound together as a community. However, the rise of wealth, boundaries, and territories also brought the earliest seeds of organized conflict. By the end of the Neolithic period, archaeological evidence shows signs of warfare, defensive fortifications, and traces of violence on human remains. A long era of peace where humans lived close to nature, shared resources, and cooperated was slowly coming to an end. In its place emerged a new age, one defined by power, competition, and survival on a larger scale. And yet, all of these achievements, from the first spear, the loyal dog, to the mighty stone circles, began with the first footsteps of ancient humans as they walked through cold mist, stepping onto the damp earth of a wild and untamed land. It was in those primal moments that the story of Britain, of human society, and of ourselves was first written.